Fettuccini alla matriciana!
3 big things American expats are sick and tired of living abroad. Hello and welcome to our Retire Early lifestyle. Let's get right down into this information you're waiting for. But before we begin, let me add that these are not all of the reasons expats don't like living abroad. These are some of the top reasons why expats become dissatisfied with their new life abroad. But you can overcome these 3 challenges, but it takes effort. Let's start with number 3, lack of connection, lonely, and homesick. Wow. Not everyone that goes abroad will feel homesick or lonely on the same level. Everyone is different with their own feelings. And you would think it would be the solo travelers. While some solo travelers do become lonely, many are comfortable with their own company. Almost all expats at some time in their live abroad journey will feel homesick. You're really not sick, you just miss the familiarity of your old life. Being lonely or homesick doesn't usually set in until after a person has experienced all the thrills and excitement of the new place you're in. Once you've had a chance to settle a bit and stop and smell the roses, or maybe the diesel fumes, you stop and say to yourself, so this is it? This is why I packed up all my belongings and dogs and moved here to feel homesick for back home? It's normal to feel homesick or lonely, and most people just allow themselves to go through this process thinking it will go away. But for some expats, it doesn't really go away. We think the loneliness sticks longer for some people because they never really feel like they belong in the local community of their new paradise. They feel like an outsider because they don't speak the language and feel disconnected and out of sorts. And so it all comes back down to the inability to adapt to all the differences and changes in a new foreign country. I don't think humans are supposed to leave everything that feels familiar and safe and normal and move to an unfamiliar place that feels strange and intimidating and not feel homesick or lonely. It's just human nature. That's why it's called a foreign country and why they call you a foreigner inside their country. Not only are you moving overseas, you're moving to a country that is foreign to you. When we go on a vacation, we don't feel homesick, and that's because it's a short 1 or 2 week and sometimes 1 or 2 month holiday, and we know we are going back to the familiarity of our life back home. And I have to tell you, a lot of people can't wait to get back home after a vacation. If that's you, you better think twice before moving to a foreign country permanently. A vacation is not permanent, it's fun, excitement, and adventure. That's what Americans used to do, was take vacations. Now they are enticed to move to these foreign places, and you know the rest of that story. Bottom line, if you don't adjust well to change in your home country, then you won't adjust to the strangeness and differences in a foreign country very well either. Just moving into a new home and leaving the old one behind in the same town can make people long for the old home because of the time spent there and the memories of living there. Another big thing that American expats say they don't like about living in a foreign country is getting gringo foreigner gouged, and for good reason. It's everywhere you go and everything you do. This one might be number 1 for some people, just depends. If you have spent good money on permanent residency visa, spent good money on renting a long-term rental or buying a home, and have gotten registered into their system for healthcare and insurance, why are these countries and its people targeting permanent resident Americans for more money? It's ridiculous. I mean, you're not a tourist. Tourists will get gouged, and that's a given. Most people figure you're on vacation for a week or 2 and it's going to cost some bucks, and vacations do cost mucho bucks. That's why we only do them once a year, or sometimes even less. But we allow getting gouged when we're on vacation. It's expected, up to a point anyway. When you live somewhere full-time as a full-time resident, it's downright wrong to gouge foreigners for more money. This is why it helps to speak the language enough to interact with the locals and get the deals. You can get by not speaking the language, but your life will be more expensive. If you can't speak Spanish or Italian or Greek, how can you negotiate properly? How can you tell them you don't want the tourist rate? Treat me right and I'll always pay my rent on time, we used to tell them. This works because they want a long-time renter so they can count on that money every month. The locals were not always good renters. Sure, it's cheaper abroad, but is it cheaper abroad really? Not for everyone. That's precisely why we started helping expats find locally priced rentals when we lived in Cuenca. We didn't want the rents to spiral out of control like they do in these best-named retirement havens. And it worked while we were there, but once we left, they spiraled out of control. Landlords want to get as much rent from the foreigner that they can muster up, and Americans usually seem willing to pay up because they're comparing prices to back home. We actually know of expats personally that left because everywhere they went, they'd get gringo gouged. It's very difficult to stop because of the perception that other countries have of Americans. Americans are walking ATMs to other countries. As some of our longtime viewers know, we didn't put up with it. We did a lot of walking away when we lived abroad. We used to tell landlords, we don't want the tourist rate, we want the long-term rental price, okay? And we said that in Spanish or Italian, depending on where we were living at the time. We let them know ahead of time, don't waste your time gouging us, and if they did gouge us, we'd just smile and walk away. Bye-bye. That actually works while the foreigner traffic is still in its early stages. However, in the later stages of a bubble, the onslaught of foreigners is so out of control that nothing works unless you speak the language and get far away from those other expats. We notice that the people of many other countries, when it comes to money, don't understand principle. For them, it's all about the money, but for some Americans that stand on ethics, it's the principle of the thing. You don't have to be rude or condescending or get in their face. Simply smile and walk away. Works like a charm. And you're not considered an ugly American when you do it that way. Some Americans have disliked getting gouged so much that it sent them packing. And don't think it is reserved for developing countries either. This phenomenon happens everywhere. Asia and Europe, Italy, Portugal, and Spain gouge the foreigner considerably if they know they can get away with it. Just saying, they're your friends when you're paying more for something, but if you resist or negotiate, they all of a sudden stop being all smiley and friendly. That's how you know the good folks from the not so good. And our very last one on what Americans get sick and tired of when living abroad is being a victim of a crime. This stuns the expat, even if it's just a petty crime such as a phone getting stolen or an earring getting snatched from an ear. Now, as we have said before in other videos, we don't like to call the inability to adapt to the culture as what the vlogger gang calls it, culture shock, because it's not culture shock. It's a surprise that Italians still eat horse meat and blood pudding in some regions, but we're not in shock over it. However, when it comes to being a victim of a crime, there is some truth to the shock of a culture, even if it's a petty crime. We have seen a few older expats so shaken up from petty crime it made them leave. Let us tell you a story. There was a very nice older couple we were helping to get a rental home in Cuenca, and she told us about an incident that happened to her in broad daylight. She said her and her husband were standing at the top of the stairs off of Calle Larga by the Rio Tomobamba River, admiring the beautiful Andes Mountains backdrop, when a thief, out of nowhere, snatched one of her earrings and fled like a wild monkey down the numerous steps, obviously knowing this older woman was not going to be able to chase him down the hundreds of steps. They watched him jumping 2 steps at a time down the stairs, and when he got down to the bottom, the thief met up with his accomplice. That's how they do it in developing countries. Rarely do they steal on their own. They work in pairs, trios, and groups. But anyway, lo and behold, the expat told us the earrings were fake. They weren't even real. He grabbed fashion jewelry, thinking he was getting a real pearl or something, because, well, don't rich gringos wear the real thing? We often think things won't happen to us, and many expats go abroad and nothing does happen to them, but it always happens to someone, and it could be you. About 6 months or so later, we met with this couple on the street, and we started up a conversation asking them how they were getting along, and she told us that she got her cell phone taken just off the street in Parque Calderon in El Centro. They apparently grabbed it out of her handbag. They were watching them, and they saw that she put it in her purse, and boy, was that an easy steal. We couldn't believe what we were hearing, as that park usually has tourist police and seems so crowded and full of people, but that's what happened, again, in broad daylight. Then they told us they were leaving Cuenca and going back to the States. We asked them, is it because of the crime? And they both said no. They just happened to remember they had grandchildren, and they were missing their grandbabies and wanted to go back home. And as you can see, these things, the gringo gouging, the loneliness, and being a crime victim, are things that affect the expat personally and in deep, deep ways. That's why they're at the top of this list. So until next video, have a great week and be blessed. Bye-bye.